Good evening from London. Hope everyone can hear me. And welcome to the 11th live stream of the Korean Friendship Association, British group for the study of the Juche idea. So glad that you could all join me tonight. I'll be speaking for about, I think, roughly 20 minutes to half an hour, and then we will take a few questions from the chat and aim to finish in about an hour. As I hope everybody can hear me loud and clear. And tonight I'm going to be talking about why people's career does not need aid, why it doesn't need to, in inverted commas, open up and reform, blah, 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 etc. So that's going to be the main thrust of this broadcast tonight. And we will take, as I said, a few questions after I've finished talking. And good evening to comrades from Scotland and Turkey, and from Turkey who have just joined. Great to see you here. Marshal Kim Jong-un said recently, after Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK, or People's Korea, was hit by floods in the its northwestern area, the area bordering China, where you've got the River Amnok. He said, and I quote, "What we set as the priority in all realms and processes of state affairs is the firm trust in the people and the way of tackling problems thoroughly based on self-reliance. The party's central committee and the government will rely entirely on the patriotic enthusiasm and courage of our people and the potentialities of our country in the ongoing rehabilitation too." End of quotation. And he said that when he visited the flood afflicted areas in the DPRK. And I think this was a very strong declaration of self-reliance and of the DPRK's determination to solve the issues, the problems that had arisen by its own efforts, not to look for the aid of others, however generous it may seem. Thus, People's Korea is overcoming the flood damage by its own efforts on the principle of self-reliance. However, this has been criticized by the Western imperialist mainstream media and so-called North Korea experts, quote unquote, who are in reality paid by the CIA or South Korea or both. There are even claims of starvation. Of course, starvation is a myth. If you took mainstream media accounts seriously, by now, the entire population of the DPRK would have starved to death, not once, but 4 or 5 times. As I've argued in my book, The Famine That Never Was, the so-called famine of the 1990s was a myth. The population of the DPRK actually increased during that period. And by the way, my book, The Famine That Never Was, is now available in a German translation as well as English, so I think that's great. People's Korea does not need the so-called aid of the US and other imperialists or the miserable South Korean puppets, who themselves are unable to survive even a day without foreign aid, foreign trade, or foreign investment. This is because People's Korea is self-reliant and has an independent national economy. Self-reliance is not just a slogan, but a coherent, strategy based on a scientific philosophy and guiding idea, the Juche idea, which was authored by President Kim Il-sung and developed in depth by Chairman Kim Jong-il. One of the many myths about the DPRK, and there are so many myths about the DPRK, big and small, one of the myths about the DPRK is that it was quote unquote dependent on Soviet aid, even though the Soviet Union vanished over 30 years ago. We still get this myth, or that the DPRK was built by Soviet aid. But in fact, in the early 1960s, the DPRK came under massive pressure from the Soviet big power chauvinists and revisionists, who actually suspended cooperation with the DPRK in 1962. President Kim Il-sung said in October 1962, and I quote, "It is not true that we cannot live without aid. We can not only live as well as we wish, even without aid, but also build socialism splendidly, and certainly must do so." End of quotation. Later, in 1964, he made reference to, I quote, "the absurd argument of the revisionists who claim that socialism cannot be built without outside assistance." End of quotation. The DPRK, under sanctions and blockade, and let us remember that the DPRK is one of the most sanctioned countries in the world, if not the most sanctioned countries, the most sanctioned country in the world, and it has been under US blockade since virtually day one, certainly from 1949. So it's been under US blockade, just not for a few years, but for 75 years. We must remember this. In the DPRK, between 1946 and 1984, industrial output value increased by 431 times. In the same period, per capita national income increased by 65 times. Grain production increased by 5.3 times. During the period of the Cholima upsurge, Cholima being a mythical and legendary flying horse which can cover great distance in a day, during the 1950s, industrial output growth hit 40%. Yes, 40% in 1 year. And in those days, the DPRK built a flat in 14 minutes and achieved incredible things. This led the famous Cambridge economist, Professor Joan V. Robinson, to describe the DPRK as the Korean miracle. And of course, this term has been appropriated by the South Korean puppets. In recent years, the DPRK closed its borders due to the global health crisis. And it closed its borders in January 2020 and kept its borders closed for about 4 years. Some countries would have collapsed within days of closing their borders, but not the DPRK. Moreover, when COVID-19 was sent into the DPRK by the South Korean puppets in the spring of 2022, the DPRK correctly rejected imperialist and South Korean puppet aid. People who claim that the DPRK needs massive outside aid are unaware of the fact that the DPRK is highly self-reliant. Only a small fraction of its gross domestic product comes from foreign trade, in contrast to South Korea, which is heavily dependent on foreign trade. A British academic, Dr. Malcolm Caldwell, of the School of Oriental and African Studies of the University of London, once wrote, and I quote, "What is clear is that deprived of massive loans, US military propping, and integration into the international capitalist economy, South Korea would collapse, whereas abiding by Juche, North Korea can stand independently, indefinitely." And that is from the book The Wealth of Some Nations, published in 1977 by Z Press. Moreover, those who say that the DPRK should accept foreign aid have a hidden agenda. Yes, a hidden agenda. Aid from the imperialist countries is a poisoned candy which is used to destroy socialism. Also, aid from imperialist countries actually benefits imperialism because it comes with strings. It usually means that the recipient country has to buy expensive goods from the donor country. In other words, Britain or the US would give X million dollars to a third world country on the condition that they buy X million dollars worth of, I don't know, shoes or bags or tinned food from the donor country. People's Korea is 100 times and 1,000 times better off without imperialist aid. On the issue of the DPRK copying other socialist countries, and this is an old subject, People's Korea has its own way. It has the Juche idea, which stipulates that the people of each country are the masters of the revolution in construction, that the revolution in construction should be carried out independently and creatively. The DPRK does not copy other countries, but of course is prepared to learn from the positive experience of other countries. President Kim Il-sung always stressed that the DPRK would apply the experience that is suited to the DPRK's situation and needs in a way that is appropriate to the situation of the DPRK. What works in one country may not necessarily work in another country. The Juche idea is based on the whole experience of the Korean Revolution and the history of Korea. In the past, different people wanted to depend on foreign countries and copy them submissively. They became known as flunkyists. It soon became apparent that looking up to other countries was not the way forward. In fact, it only brought disasters such as the colonization of Korea by Japan and internal conflict and divisions in the early nationalist and communist movement. Therefore, the Korean people rejected flunkeyism and established Juche. Since then, they have achieved one miracle after another and never looked back. It can be added in passing, maybe on a controversial note, that some people have criticized the socialist country that has been presented as an example for the DPRK to follow by reactionaries. Some people have said that the country concerned is, quote, on the road to capitalism, that socialism is wobbling in that country, and that is dodgy, quote unquote, etc. A few decades ago, a certain neighboring country to the DPRK adopted reform and opening up, only to invite harsh criticism from the world revolutionary and progressive people, and the country concerned lost many friends. The question is posed: does the DPRK need to, in inverted commas, reform and inverted commas, open up? The answer is no, no, and no. As the great leader, Comrade Kim Jong-il, wrote in his work, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is a Juche-orientated socialist state with invincible might, and I quote, "The imperialists are now slandering our republic, the motherland of Juche, claiming that it is closed and isolated, and are making futile attempts to lead us to reform and openness. Our country has never closed its doors. It maintains good relations with many countries, home to billions of people around the world, based on mutual respect. As for reform, we reformed the outdated social system in a revolutionary fashion decades ago and have been constantly creating the new and renovating what is old and backward. In fact, the imperialists and reactionaries are hostile towards our country and are blockading it and trying to isolate it. The reform and openness that they are advocating represents a move to destroy and put down our style of socialism. Such moves will only worsen their relations with us and are doomed to failure." End of quotation. This succinctly and eloquently sums up why the DPRK does not need to reform and open up, and also the reactionary nature of the so-called reform and opening up advocated by the imperialists. As a matter of fact, People's Korea carried out radical, far-reaching democratic reforms such as the agrarian reform, the nationalisation of basic industries, the labour law, the law on sexual equality. It carried out socialist transformation in its own Juche-based way, an advanced socialist system centered upon the popular masses came into being in the land of the morning calm. DPRK citizens get free healthcare, free education, virtually free food, and free housing. Why do they need to give this up and change it for something else which would not suit them? The US imperialists continue to threaten the DPRK and plan an invasion of the DPRK. From the 27th of June to the 1st of August, the US imperialists staged the 29th RIMPAC exercise against the DPRK, which involved the following: 29 different nations, military and naval personnel of over 25,000, 40 surface ships, 3 submarines, 150 aircraft, and 14 national land forces, as well as the usual suspects, such as the US and South Korean puppets. Britain and a number of NATO countries participated, as did Israel. Yes, no, Israel. And other US puppet regimes in Asia, such as the Philippines, Malaysia, and Thailand. The rightist reactionary Modi regime in India even sent forces, and some Latin American countries did. From the 19th of August, the US imperialists and South Korean puppets commenced the annual UG Freedom Shield exercise, which lasted until the 29th of August, a total of 10 days. It follows earlier war exercises that were being held in the spring of this year. It was held despite the warnings of the DPRK. The UG Freedom Shield exercises included 40 kinds of field exercises, including live fire drills, as well as exercises for occupying the DPRK and decapitation strikes. US nuclear assets were also involved. UG Freedom Shield has nothing to do with freedom, but everything to do with regime change, about extending the corrupt fascist rule of the reactionary and decadent South Korean puppets to the northern half of Korea and establishing US imperialist colonial rule over the whole of the Korean Peninsula. UG Freedom Shield is being held to coincide with the tightening of the anti-DPRK triangular alliance of the US, Japan, and South Korea. Yeah, it's also been held at a time that there's an attempt to expand NATO into Asia and to create NATO's type structures in Asia. Lastly, on a sort of note of domestic politics, and we try to stay out of disputes between parties in Britain and, not side with parties. However, I was attacked in the letters column of a certain daily newspaper, so-called socialist daily newspaper. Well, it's not a socialist daily newspaper. It's a rotten revisionist rag funded by the trade union bureaucracy. And I would say that the attacks on KFA UK by certain fake left and revisionist elements prove that we in KFA UK truly defend people's career with no ifs or buts, and we are in the front line of defending people's career. So, to conclude, we should build a powerful solidarity movement in Britain to defend people's career with no ifs or buts. Thank you for listening. I'll start taking the questions. Right. Okay, don't seem to be any questions. Some very good comments, which are good. I believe the spirit, determination, and pride of the Korean people is lifted up by the Workers' Party of Korea's commitment to self-reliance. The ideology and spirits of the people are the first pillar. Viva DPRK, viva. Thank you for your comments, Ben. Well, with regard to how the handling of the flood damage is being done. Firstly, you would have seen in the Korean Central News Agency that teams of party members were dispatched to the flood affected areas, and also the Paktusan Youth Shock Brigade. So I think the flood rehabilitation work is underway. Meanwhile, the families who were affected by the flooding and their children were moved into Pyongyang, and they've been accommodated at the April 25th hostel of the Korean People's Army, which is the hostel they use to accommodate participants in military parades in the DPRK. And they have been taken on sightseeing trips to Pyongyang, and the children are also being educated. Their schooling is being continued in Pyongyang, so they've not lost out on education. I'm confident from the reports that I've seen that the flood damage will soon be resolved. certainly in the past, like in 2016, when floods actually struck, when I was actually in the DPRK, and damaged the northeastern area of the DPRK, the work of rebuilding houses was done very quickly within a few weeks. So I'm confident that within a couple of weeks, the housing and other buildings like public buildings will be restored. Okay, next question, please. Just make sure I have not missed any questions. Well, while I wait for uh, questions to come in, I'm sure there'll be a few questions in a minute. You just would remind people we got the film night tomorrow night, 1900 hours or 7 o'clock British time. We're going to have a short online meeting for the foundation of the DPRK, and we'll be holding that on the evening of Thursday, 5th. We haven't yet announced that on Facebook or Telegram, but we will do that very soon. And we also have a Q&A session later in September. We're also thinking of holding a meeting in the west of England and also a picket of the BBC. Yeah, I mean, I've seen different reports about the mobilisation of different groups of people for the flood rehabilitation. I shall host some of the reports in the chat in a bit. Well, with regard reopening, the DPRK slowly reopening. If you've seen KCNA in the last week, there's been a Mongolian delegation go to the DPRK. There's been a couple of Russian delegations go to the DPRK, and also a delegation of Koreans who live in Japan have gone as well. So the reopening of the border is going ahead step by step, and I think it will be fully open next year. I will try and find the reports about the flood rehabilitation. I've posted some of the news out of KCNA, but unfortunately, it doesn't fit very well into the chats. Unfortunately, so it's quite probably easier to just post links to the articles I think, rather than the actual articles, because I didn't realise that yeah, I'll just post a few more articles, then I'll answer the question from Ideology Explained. Right, so in answer to the question from Ideology Explained, I think it is quite positive that protests have taken place in South Korea against the warmongering of the South Korean puppets. Well, in answer to Ben's question, all the policies of the DPRK are people-centered, so they will solve the issues caused by climate change in the interests of the people, not by punitive measures such have been taken in the imperialist countries. I mean, I personally, perhaps might sound like a petty point to some people, I found the plastic bag tax in the UK very annoying. Being asked to pay for plastic bags, I thought it was very unfair. And I once said that to a member of shop staff. I, she said, "Oh, do you want a plastic bag?" And I said, "Well, not if I have to pay for one." And she pulled a funny face. And I said, "Well, Sainsbury's can afford to pay it. Why should the consumer pay, a customer pay it? Why should working class people pay for it?" So the DPRK doesn't take these kind of measures. They're doing everything to mitigate the effects of climate change in the interests of the people. And yeah, I agree. It is something that's caused by monopoly capital. Okay, next question, please. Well, August in the DPRK tends to be very hot. July is hotter, and it's also still a busy period in the DPRK because it is the run up to the rice harvest in September. So it's not really a big holiday month in the DPRK because you have Liberation Day on the 15th of August. But it's not like in Europe or Britain where where everything sort of winds down. The holiday season in the DPRK tends to be later in the year when the farming season is over. I think a lot of people go on holiday in October. Well, as far as I know, the Day of the Sun still exists. It's not been changed. Because I was in the DPRK in April this year, and it was still called the Day of the Sun, and the hotel was decorated for the 15th of April, the anniversary of the birth of the great leader, President Kim Il-sung. Yeah, I think this is due to speculation and mischievous reports by the mainstream media. It is still a public holiday in the DPRK. Yes, in the DPRK, agricultural production is very important, and often people in the cities join in and help. While I wait for more questions, I'll just remind people, I'll put a link in the chat, that I published a book on my visit to the DPRK in April, which was actually Comrade Ben from KFA Scotland who suggested that. So the book is now out, and I'll just put a link in the description. The school year in the DPRK actually, and the university year actually, starts in April. So, I mean, it is different to Britain and other countries. Okay, don't seem to be as many questions. Yeah, oh, yes, here we are. Comrade, do you know if coal production is expanding in the DPRK? Yes, indeed it is. Coal production in the DPRK continues to expand, as does steel and iron production. Yeah, I also agree that October is a lovely month. It's actually wonderful to be in the DPRK in October around the anniversary of the foundation of the Workers' Party of Korea on October the 10th. It's a real wonderful period when during the daytime the weather is still warm, and if you're able to go out into the countryside, you can see the harvest, the fields, it looks really good. Sort of countryside is sort of like golden coloured. It's wonderful, and of course, as I said, October 10th is the foundation day of the Workers' Party of Korea, and next year it will be the 80th anniversary of the foundation of the Workers' Party of Korea. So the Workers' Party of Korea would have been leading the Korean Revolution and the Korean people for 80 years. That's quite a big achievement in itself. And August 15th next year will be the 80th anniversary of liberation. And when you think of it, the DPRK is the longest lived socialist state because the October Revolution in Russia, the period of socialism in Russia only was lasted 74 years, so as DPRK's made it to is going to make it to 80 years. So that's quite a big achievement, and I think it shows the durability of Juche-based socialism. Ah, here we are. Question. Well, with regard to the construction of infrastructure and housing, the DPRK has introduced many innovations into construction work, and in the 1950s, you had sort of dogmatism in the field of construction. People who argued you couldn't modernize and mechanize the construction of homes, and DPRK adopted methods of prefabrication and went ahead at a very fast rate. So DPRK all the time is updating its methods of construction. Well, it's certainly many pictures of the DPRK steel and iron industry and coal industry in the DPRK media. And in the past, there's been sort of reference to different figures for steel production. I can dig those out for you, Ben, and send to you. But yeah, in the DPRK, you got heavy industry. It's not like Britain, where the coal and steel industries have been butchered, leaving behind whole communities devastated and mass unemployment. The DPRK's whole economic strategy, the strategy of building an independent national economy, has always been based around the concept that heavy industry forms the core of the economy. So it's seen as very important in the DPRK. Of course, at the same time, they have not sacrificed light industry or agriculture. They developed all three uh, simultaneously. Okay, Ben. Well, thank you for joining tonight. We're probably going to finish soon anyway. I don't really intend to go on much past 8 o'clock, but thanks for your question, Ben. Okay, are there any other questions? Anyone else wants to chip in with a question? We've got 13 more minutes for your questions. No, there don't seem to be many more questions, and so unless there's a sudden rush of questions, I think we will close the live broadcast in about 5 minutes, unless people have got more questions. While I'm here, I might as well. Oh, wait a minute. There is a question. What are the upcoming celebrations that DPRK will be celebrating with mass parades and all? Will it also be on September the 9th? Well, September the 9th will be the 76th anniversary of the foundation of the DPRK, and of course that is an important day. The day the DPRK was founded. However, I don't think there will be military parades because these are usually only on anniversaries which end in a 0 or a 5, which have special importance in the DPRK, and these will be marked with parades, and also public holidays are extended to 4 days, from 1 day to 4 days. So I don't think you'll be seeing any great parades, not until next year, when you've got those 2 keynote anniversaries in August and October. A good question. How do you think Keir Starmer will handle British relations with the DPRK? A very interesting question. I've yet to see Starmer actually say anything of substance about the DPRK. He's not said anything at all about the DPRK, as far as I know. He's been silent on the subject. One can only guess and speculate on his policies, and given his policies on other issues, I don't think we can expect any change with the policy of the previous government, the Conservative government. Starmer on Israel and on the Ukraine has shown that he is a complete reactionary. He supports US imperialism 100%. So I think this will be reflected in his policy towards the DPRK. Basically, Britain has had a very two-faced stance with its relations with the DPRK. On the one hand, they established diplomatic relations. That was a long time ago, back in December 2000, and the DPRK was opened in London in 2003. But whilst you've got these relations exist, the British government has been very hostile to the DPRK behind the scenes. In fact, not behind the scenes, often quite publicly. They've backed the sanctions against the DPRK. They've implemented their own sanctions against the DPRK. And also increasingly participated in war exercises on the Korean Peninsula against the DPRK. You've got Royal Navy ships in Korean waters trying to enforce these sanctions against the DPRK. And as far as I can see, Starmer is going along with this. Basically, the British ruling class want to see the subversion and destruction of Korean-style socialism. It's as simple as that. And Starmer fully goes along with that. So I doubt if we will see any change, and maybe even a worsening of relations. And it is a fact that the new DPRK ambassador to Britain, Mr. Moon, has not been able to take up his post at the DPRK embassy yet, and I'm not sure whether this is because of some obstruction by the British authorities. Okay, that was a useful question. I think unless we get any questions in the next 2 minutes, I'm going to close the session now. Just wait, because I know the live chat can be very, very slow. Okay, well, I think it's been a very good session. I think everything that's been said sort of underlines the importance of defending people's career with no ifs or buts. It's genuinely self-reliant socialist country that is standing in the front line against US imperialism and indeed British imperialism. So we must do more to expand the activities of the Korean Friendship Association of the UK and the British group for the study of the Juche idea. And as I said earlier, we got a few activities coming up. We got film nights tomorrow. We're going to have an online meeting on the 5th of September to mark the anniversary of the foundation of the DPRK. And we're thinking of some activities for the autumn. And just before we close, there is a question, and this is going to be the final question. Do you think the DPRK might close its borders with the Mpox outbreak, if not another pandemic in the world? Well, I mean, I can't really answer for the DPRK, but I would just say generally, if the DPRK perceives that there is a threat to the health and well-being of its citizens, it will close its borders. It will take measures to prevent the spread of a pandemic illness in the DPRK. But I think with monkeypox, there's a lot of speculation. Some of it looks like hype in the media. We can't be sure, of course, but sometimes the media hype these things up, and I hope in this case it is something that is being hyped up and isn't as serious as they're trying to say. But anyway, so thank everybody for their questions and their contributions. It's been very good. I hope to be back in the middle of September with another live stream, and possibly at the end of September. So I thank everybody for listening tonight and wish everybody a very good evening. So goodbye, comrades and friends. Have a great evening. Bye.